The cold was the worst part. Daniel Harper had survived many difficult things in his 32 years of life, but the cold aboard the prison ship was something different. It sank into his bones like water into sand. It made his teeth chatter so hard he thought they might break. It kept him awake at night when his body desperately needed sleep. Daniel was an engineer from the human salvage vessel called the Wandering Star. His job was simple. He traveled through space with his crew, finding broken ships and stations, fixing what could be fixed, and salvaging what could not. It was honest work. It paid well enough, and it let him see corners of the galaxy that most humans would never visit. 3 weeks ago, his ship had picked up a distress signal. The captain, a careful woman named, had wanted to ignore it. The signal came from space, and they did not like humans. They were an ancient species, proud and suspicious of younger races. Their ships were beautiful, covered in crystal structures that glowed with inner light. Their bodies were tall and thin, with skin that shimmered like moonlight on water and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. But Daniel had looked at the sensor readings and seen something that changed his mind. The distress signal came from a royal transport. The ship was damaged badly, drifting toward the gravity well of a dead star. In less than 6 hours, everyone aboard would be pulled into that star and burned to nothing. 200 souls. That was what the sensors told him. 200 living beings who would die if no one helped them. Daniel had not asked for permission. He had simply walked to the shuttle bay, climbed into the smallest repair craft, and launched himself toward the dying ship. Captain had screamed at him over the radio the entire way, but she had not tried to stop him. She knew Daniel. She knew that once he decided to help someone, nothing in the universe could change his mind. The ship was worse than he expected. The reactor had been damaged in what looked like an attack. Pirates maybe, or raiders from one of the lawless sectors. The crystal hull had cracks running through it like veins in a leaf. Emergency lights flickered on and off. The air inside was thin and cold, much colder than they usually kept their ships. Daniel worked for 4 hours without stopping. His fingers bled from cuts he did not notice at the time. His lungs burned from breathing the thin atmosphere. Twice, he nearly electrocuted himself on exposed power conduits, but he managed to stabilize the reactor. He managed to restart the engines. He managed to pull the ship away from the gravity well just minutes before it would have been too late. When he finished, he collapsed against a wall and laughed with pure relief. 200 lives saved. 200 beings who would see their families again, who would watch another sunrise, who would have futures because he had refused to look away from their suffering. That was when the guards found him. They were tall, even taller than regular. Their armor was black crystal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They pointed weapons at Daniel that hummed with deadly energy. They spoke words he could not understand because his translator had been damaged during the repair work. Daniel raised his hand slowly. He tried to smile. He tried to show them that he was not a threat, but they did not care about his intentions. They saw a human aboard a royal vessel, a human who had touched their sacred technology, a human who had seen things that outsiders were never supposed to see. They put him in chains and dragged him to the prison cells. The princess came to see him on the second day. Her name was, and she was the reason the transport had been traveling through this sector. She was young for a, which still meant she was older than Daniel's grandmother had been when she died. Her skin glowed with soft blue light. Her 4 eyes studied him with an expression he could not read. She stood outside his cell for a long moment before speaking. When she finally did, her voice carried strange harmonics, like multiple people singing the same words at slightly different times. "You saved us," she said. "The guards told me what you did. You saved all of us." Daniel looked up at her from where he sat on the cold metal floor. His body was already starting to suffer from the environment. The air was wrong. The temperature was wrong. Even the light was wrong, tuned to frequencies that made his eyes ache. "I did what anyone would do," he said. The princess tilted her head, a gesture that seemed to indicate confusion. "No, that is not true. Your ship was safe. You could have continued on your journey. You chose to risk your life for people you had never met, people who are not even your own species. Why?" Daniel thought about the question. It seemed so strange to him that she needed to ask it. "Because you needed help," he said finally. "Because I could give that help. Because it would have been wrong to fly away and let you die when I had the power to save you." Princess was silent for a long time. Her 4 eyes blinked slowly, one pair at a time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, touched with something that might have been shame. "I am sorry," she said, "for what we have done to you. You deserve better than a prison cell. But our laws are very old and my people are very afraid of what they do not understand. The council will decide what happens to you. Until then, you must stay here." "How long will that take?" She did not answer. She simply looked at him with those strange, beautiful eyes, and Daniel understood that she did not know. It could be weeks. It could be months. It could be years. They were an ancient species, and ancient species did not hurry. The princess left, and Daniel was alone again with the cold. He tried to keep track of the days, but it was difficult. There were no windows in his cell. The lights never changed. Food came at random intervals, strange crystals that tasted like nothing and did little to satisfy his hunger. His body was not designed for this food. His body was not designed for this cold. His body was not designed for this air. Slowly, day by day, Daniel Harper began to die. But he did not regret what he had done. Even as his strength faded, even as his hope grew dim, he knew that he had made the right choice. 200 lives for one. That was a trade he would make again without hesitation. He only wished that someone would tell his mother what had happened to him. He only wished that someone would tell his sister that he loved her. He only wished that someone would remember that he had tried to do good in a universe that so often rewarded cruelty instead. The cold crept deeper into his bones, and Daniel Harper closed his eyes and waited for whatever would come next. 6 weeks had passed since Daniel Harper was thrown into the prison cell. He could no longer stand without help. His legs had become too weak, his muscles wasted from lack of proper nutrition. When he tried to walk, the world spun around him and he fell. After the 3rd time hitting his head on the hard floor, he stopped trying. The ship's doctor was unnamed. He was tall and thin like all his people, with silver skin that never showed emotion. He came to check on Daniel once every few days, running scanners over his body and recording the results. He never spoke to Daniel directly. He never showed concern or sympathy. He simply took his readings and left, as if Daniel were a piece of equipment to be monitored rather than a living being. Daniel understood what the readings must show. He could feel his body failing. The food could not provide what human cells needed to survive. The cold was damaging his organs. The wrong mixture of gases in the air made every breath a struggle. He was dying slowly, and everyone knew it, and no one seemed to care. Princess came to visit him again in the 7th week. When she saw his condition, she stopped in the doorway and made a sound that Daniel's translator could not interpret. It might have been a gasp. It might have been a cry. Whatever it was the first real emotion he had seen from any since his capture. "You are worse," she said, stepping into the cell. Her glow seemed dimmer than before, or perhaps that was just Daniel's failing eyes. "Much worse. Why did no one tell me?" Daniel tried to smile at her, but his lips were cracked and bleeding. "I do not think anyone thought it was important," he said. His voice was weak now, barely above a whisper. Speaking took effort that he could not always afford. The princess knelt beside him on the cold floor. Up close, Daniel could see patterns in her skin that he had not noticed before, swirling lines of lighter blue that moved slowly like clouds across a sky. Her 4 eyes were wet with something that looked very much like tears. "This is wrong," she said. "This is all wrong. You saved our lives. You should be celebrated, not left to rot in a cell." "Your people do not see it that way." "Then my people are wrong." She left the cell quickly after that, her long legs carrying her away at a speed that surprised Daniel. He had never seen a move so fast. He wondered what she was going to do, but he did not have the energy to wonder for long. Sleep pulled at him like gravity, and he let himself fall into its dark embrace. Princess went straight to Captain, the commander of the ship. She found him on the bridge, standing before the great crystal window that showed the stars stretching out into infinity. He was old, his skin more gray than silver, his 4 eyes clouded with the weight of centuries. "The human is dying," said without greeting. "We must do something." Captain did not turn to look at her. "The human is a security concern. The council will decide his fate when they finish their deliberations. He will be dead before they finish. Do you not understand? Every day we delay, he grows weaker. His body cannot survive our environment." "Then perhaps that is for the best." The captain's voice was cold as the air that was slowly killing Daniel. "A dead prisoner creates no complications. A dead prisoner reveals no secrets." Felt something break inside her chest. It was not a physical thing, but it was real nonetheless. It was her faith in her own people, cracking like ice under too much weight. "He saved 200 lives," she said, her voice trembling with anger she had never felt before. "He saved my life, and you would let him die because it is convenient." "I would let him die because it is practical. The needs of the Dominion outweigh the needs of one alien creature." The princess did not trust herself to speak anymore. If she opened her mouth, she would say something that could not be taken back. So she turned and left the bridge, her mind racing with thoughts that terrified her. That night she went back to Daniel's cell. She brought things with her, things she had spent hours creating in her private quarters. Heated blankets made from materials that would hold warmth against his human skin. Nutrient compounds that she had researched in the ship's medical database, designed specifically for human biology. Water treated with minerals that his body desperately needed. Daniel was barely awake when she arrived. His skin had turned gray, like the color of ash after a fire burns out. His breathing was shallow and fast, his heart working too hard to pump blood through a body that was shutting down. Wrapped the heated blankets around him and felt him shiver with relief. She mixed the nutrient compounds into water and held the cup to his lips, helping him drink when his hands shook too badly to hold it himself. She sat beside him on the cold floor and did not leave. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel asked, his voice so weak she had to lean close to hear it. "You could get in trouble. Your people would not approve." "My people have forgotten what it means to be good," said, "but I have not, and I will not let you die alone in this cell." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his words were slurred with exhaustion. "I had a sister back on Earth. She is 10 years younger than me. When she was little, she used to follow me everywhere. She wanted to be an engineer too, just like her big brother." Listened, understanding that he was sharing something precious with her. "I promised her I would come home," Daniel continued. "I promised her I would teach her how to fix a ship engine. I promised her so many things." Tears rolled down his gray cheeks, cutting clean tracks through the grime that had built up over weeks of captivity. "I do not want to break my promises," he whispered, "but I do not think I have a choice anymore." Took his hand in hers. His skin was so warm compared to her own, even now when the cold had stolen so much of his heat. She held tight and made a promise of her own, silent and fierce in the darkness of the cell. She would not let him die. She would find a way to save him, even if it meant turning against everything she had ever known. The princess stayed with Daniel through the night, watching his temperature rise and fall like waves on a troubled sea. By morning, she had made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She would contact her mother, Queen, directly. She would tell her everything, and she would beg for help, even though begging was something royalty never did. For Daniel Harper, the human who had given everything for strangers would become something she had never been before. She would become a rebel. Princess sat alone in her quarters, staring at the communication device in her hands. What she was about to do broke 17 different protocols. A junior member of the royal family was never supposed to contact the queen directly. There were proper channels, proper forms, proper ways of doing things that had been established over thousands of years. The valued order above almost everything else. Breaking that order was unthinkable. But could not stop thinking about Daniel Harper dying alone in that cold cell. She could not stop thinking about the gray color of his skin, the weakness in his voice, the way his hands trembled when he tried to lift a cup of water. She could not stop thinking about his sister, waiting on a distant planet called Earth for a brother who might never come home. She activated the device and began to record her message. "Mother," she said, her voice steady despite the fear running through her veins. "I know this contact is forbidden. I know you will be angry with me, but I have no other choice. A great wrong is being done aboard this ship, and I cannot remain silent any longer." She told her mother everything. She described how Daniel had risked his life to save them, how he had worked for hours in a damaged ship, bleeding and exhausted, expecting nothing in return. She described his imprisonment, the cold cell, the wrong food, the slowly poisoning air. She described Captain's words, his willingness to let a hero die because it was convenient. "This human saved my life," said, her voice breaking with emotion. "He saved all our lives, and we are repaying him with death. Is this who we are now, Mother? Is this what the Dominion has become? A people who punish kindness and reward cruelty?" She included medical data with her message, the reports that Doctor had been collecting for weeks. The numbers told a clear story. Daniel Harper was dying. His organs were failing one by one. Without intervention, he would be dead within days. Ended her message with words she had never spoken to anyone before. "I am begging you, Mother. Please help him. Please do not let him die for the crime of saving us." She sent the message before she could change her mind. Then she sat in the darkness of her quarters and waited, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Far across the galaxy, on the crystal throne of Prime, Queen received her daughter's message. The Queen was old even by standards. She had ruled the Dominion for 200 years, guiding her people through wars and peace, through prosperity and hardship. Her decisions affected trillions of lives across hundreds of worlds. She could not afford to make choices based on emotion. Every action had to be weighed, measured, calculated for maximum benefit to her people. But as she watched her daughter's message, something stirred in the ancient chambers of her heart, something she had not felt in a very long time. They had a concept called Ani. It was an old word from the time before space travel, when their people had lived in scattered tribes across the frozen surface of their home world. Ani meant life debt. When someone saved your life, you owed them a debt that could never fully be repaid. You were bound to protect them, to honor them, to treat them as family for as long as you lived. Queen's people had forgotten Ani. In their rise to power among the stars, they had left behind the old ways, the simple truths that had guided their ancestors. They had become proud and suspicious, afraid of anything different from themselves. And now a human, a member of a species they barely acknowledged, had demonstrated Ani better than any of her own people. He had saved lives without thinking of reward. He had suffered without complaint. He was dying with dignity, still believing that he had done the right thing. The Queen made her decision in less than a minute. She ordered her personal flagship prepared for immediate departure. She assembled her royal guard, the finest warriors in the Dominion, and she set course for the cruiser where her daughter waited with a dying human hero. Back on the ship, Daniel Harper was getting worse. Had done everything she could. She had brought him more heated blankets, more nutrient compounds, more treated water. She had held his hand through the long nights when fever made him shake and sweat. She had listened to his stories about Earth, about his family, about his dreams of exploring the galaxy. But it was not enough. His body was failing too fast. The damage from weeks of exposure to the wrong environment could not be undone with blankets and vitamins. He needed real medical care, human medical care, and there was nothing like that for light years in any direction. On the 9th day after her message, Daniel stopped recognizing her. He looked at her with clouded eyes and called her. He asked if she had finished her homework. He asked if she wanted to help him fix the broken engine on their father's old car. He talked about summer days and green grass and a yellow sun in a blue sky, things that had never seen but could imagine through the love in his voice. She played along. She held his hand and told him that yes, she had finished her homework. Yes, she would love to help with the engine. Yes, everything was going to be okay. It was the kindest lie she had ever told. On the 10th day, received a message that made her cry tears of relief. The Queen's flagship had been detected on long-range sensors. Her mother was coming. Help was on the way. She ran to Daniel's cell and knelt beside his shivering body. He was barely conscious now, hovering in that gray space between sleep and death. But when she took his hand, his eyes flickered open. "Who is there?" he whispered. "It is me," said. "It is. Do you remember me, Daniel?" A small smile crossed his cracked lips. "The princess, the one with kind eyes." "Yes, I have good news, Daniel. Help is coming. My mother is coming. You are going to be okay." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was so weak she could barely hear it. "Tell your mother thank you. Tell her I am sorry for all the trouble." "You have nothing to be sorry for. You saved us. You are a hero." He shook his head slowly. Not a hero, just a man who could not look away when people needed help. He squeezed her hand with what little strength he had left. "Promise me something." "Anything." "If I do not make it, find a way to send a message to my sister. Tell her I tried to come home. Tell her I love her. Tell her to keep chasing her dreams, even when they seem impossible." Blinked back tears. "You can tell her yourself. You are going to survive this." "Maybe." Daniel's eyes closed, exhaustion pulling him back toward unconsciousness. "But just in case, promise me." "I promise," whispered. 3 days later, the Queen's flagship arrived, and everything changed. The Queen's flagship was the largest ship in the fleet. It was called the Eternal Light, and it had been built over 300 years ago by the finest craftsmen in the Dominion. Its crystal hull stretched for miles, glowing with inner fire that could be seen from planets away. Smaller ships scattered before it like fish fleeing a great whale. No one in the galaxy, friend or enemy, could mistake it for anything other than what it was, the personal vessel of the most powerful being in space. Queen did not wait for docking procedures to be completed. She transported directly onto the cruiser with her royal guard, appearing in a flash of light on the main bridge. Her gown shifted colors with her mood, currently cycling through deep purples and blacks that indicated cold fury barely held in check. Captain had been given no warning of her arrival. He had been standing at his command console, reviewing routine reports when the Queen materialized before him. The shock on his face would have been amusing under different circumstances. His silver skin went pale gray. His 4 eyes widened until they seemed to take up half his face. He dropped to his knees so fast that the impact must have hurt. "Your Majesty," he stammered, "this is an unexpected honor. If I had known you were coming, I would have prepared a proper welcome." Queen looked down at him with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "Where is the human?" she asked. Her voice carried harmonic tones that filled the bridge, making every crew member freeze in place. "The human. Your Majesty, I do not understand why you would concern yourself with a simple prisoner. The council is still deliberating on his case. Everything is being handled according to proper procedure." "I asked you a question, Captain. Where is the human?" Swallowed hard. In the medical bay, Your Majesty. The princess insisted he be moved there several days ago. His condition has been deteriorating, and she believed he needed closer monitoring. The queen turned and walked toward the door without another word. Her guards fell into formation around her, their black armor gleaming under the ship's crystal lights. Scrambled to his feet and hurried after her, still trying to understand what was happening. Your Majesty, if I may ask, why are you here? Surely a matter involving a single human prisoner does not require your personal attention. I assure you, everything is under control. Queen stopped walking. She turned to face the captain, and the look in her eyes made him take 3 steps backward without meaning to. Under control, she repeated, her voice soft and deadly. Is that what you call it? A man who saved 200 lives, including my daughter, is dying in your medical bay. His body is poisoned by our air. His organs are failing from our food. He has been suffering for weeks while you did nothing. And you tell me everything is under control. Your Majesty, he is a security risk. He saw the interior of a royal vessel. Protocol demands that such individuals be detained until the Council can determine the proper course of action. Protocol. The Queen spoke the word like it tasted bad in her mouth. Do you know what your protocol has cost us, Captain? Do you have any idea what we have lost? She did not wait for his answer. She continued walking toward the medical bay, her gown now shifting to bright red, the color of judgment and condemnation in culture. Princess was waiting at the entrance to the medical bay. She looked exhausted, dark circles under all 4 of her eyes, her usually perfect appearance worn ragged by days of constant worry. But when she saw her mother, hope flared in her face like a flame finding fuel. Mother, she said, bowing quickly, thank you for coming, thank you so much. Queen placed a hand on her daughter's cheek, a gesture of affection rarely shown among royalty. You did the right thing, contacting me. I am proud of you. They entered the medical bay together. Doctor stood near a bed where Daniel Harper lay motionless under a thin blanket. The monitors around him beeped with warnings, red lights flashing to indicate vital signs that were dangerously low. The Queen approached the bed and looked down at the human, who had caused such trouble for everyone around him. He was smaller than she expected. Humans were a young species, fragile and short-lived compared to their bodies were soft, easily damaged, quick to break down when removed from the narrow range of conditions they needed to survive. And yet this Daniel Harper, had walked into a dying ship filled with strangers and worked until his hands bled to save them. As if sensing her presence, Daniel's eyes opened. They were clouded with pain and fever, but there was still light in them, still life. When he saw the Queen standing over him, he tried to sit up. Don't, said quickly, pressing him gently back down. You are too weak, you will hurt yourself. But Daniel kept trying, his arms shaking with the effort. Your Majesty, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I apologize for not being able to bow properly. I mean no disrespect. Queen felt something shift inside her heart. Here was a man who had been imprisoned, poisoned, and left to die by her people. And his first words to her were an apology for not being able to show proper respect. You saved my daughter's life, she said, her voice gentler than anyone on the ship had ever heard it. You asked for nothing in return, and we have repaid you with suffering. Daniel managed a weak smile. I do not hold it against anyone. Different cultures, different rules. I knew the risks when I flew to your ship. No, the Queen's voice hardened. Wrong is wrong, regardless of what rules permit it. My people have forgotten something essential about ourselves. We have forgotten honor. We have forgotten mercy. We have forgotten that a life saved demands a life protected. She turned to Doctor, who was trying very hard to become invisible against the far wall. You will transfer this human to my flagship immediately. My personal physicians will take over his care. They have experience with multiple species. They will know how to heal him. Your Majesty began. The protocols require that. I am the Queen. I am the protocol. Anyone who interferes with this human's treatment will answer to me personally. Do you understand?" Bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. "Yes, Your Majesty. Immediately, Your Majesty." The queen looked at her daughter, at the love and gratitude shining in her eyes. She had not seen show such emotion since she was a small child, before royal training had taught her to hide her feelings behind a mask of calm. "You care for this human," the queen said quietly. "It was not a question." Nodded. "He is the bravest person I have ever met, and the kindest. He has taught me things about compassion that I never learned from our own people." Queen looked back at Daniel Harper, who had drifted into unconsciousness again. His breathing was shallow but steady. The monitors showed vital signs that were weak but stable. He would survive. She would make sure of it. "Prepare him for transfer," she ordered. "And Captain." The captain stepped forward, his face pale with fear. "Yes, Your Majesty." "You are relieved of command. When we return to Prime, you will face a tribunal to answer for your actions. The charge is criminal negligence resulting in harm to a protected individual." Opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. He knew better than to argue with the queen when her gown burned the color of judgment. He simply bowed his head and accepted his fate. Queen turned and walked out of the medical bay, her daughter at her side. "Come," she said. "We have much work to do, and when this human is healed, the entire Dominion will know his name." The recovery took 3 months. Daniel Harper spent the first 4 weeks aboard the Queen's flagship in critical care. His body had been so damaged by weeks in the wrong environment that the physicians had to work around the clock to save him. They created special nutrient compounds designed specifically for human biology. They adjusted the temperature in his room to match Earth conditions. They filled his lungs with air that contained the right mixture of gases. They did things that doctors had never done before, because no doctor had ever cared enough to save a human life. For the first week, Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness. He had dreams filled with memories of home, of green fields and blue skies, of his mother's voice calling him for dinner, of his sister's laughter echoing through their small house. Sometimes he woke up confused, not knowing where he was or how he had gotten there. But every time he opened his eyes, he saw Princess sitting beside his bed, and the fear would fade away. She came to visit him every day without fail. At first, she told herself it was duty. She owed him a debt that could never be repaid. The least she could do was keep him company while he healed. But as the days passed and Daniel grew stronger, she began to admit the truth to herself. She came because she wanted to. She came because talking to him made her happy in ways she had never experienced before. She came because somewhere along the way, without meaning to, she had fallen in love with this strange, warm, impossibly kind human from a distant world called Earth. Daniel told her stories about his life. He talked about growing up in a small town, about learning to fix things with his father, about the day he decided to become an engineer and travel among the stars. He talked about his mother, who had cried when he left Earth but told him to chase his dreams anyway. He talked about his sister, who sent him messages every week filled with drawings and jokes and questions about the aliens he had met. In return, told him about the. She explained their history, their culture, their long, slow journey from tribal wanderers to masters of an interstellar dominion. She told him about the old ways, the concepts like Ani that her people had forgotten in their rise to power. She told him about her own life, the expectations and duties of being a princess, the loneliness of always having to be perfect. "I never had a real friend," she admitted one night, when Daniel was finally strong enough to sit up in bed and eat solid food. "Everyone I know wants something from me. My title, my influence, my connection to the throne. No one ever just wanted to know me." Daniel smiled at her, his face still thin but alive with color now. "I want to know you," he said. "I want to know everything about you. Not because you are a princess, but because you held my hand when I was dying and told me everything would be okay." She did not know how to respond to that. No one had ever spoken to her with such simple honesty. So she just took his hand again, her cool fingers wrapping around his warm ones, and they sat together in comfortable silence. News of what had happened spread through both human and space. The story of Daniel Harper became famous almost overnight. People called him a hero, a symbol of what humanity could be at its best. The council issued formal apologies for his treatment. They offered reparations, proposed new treaties, promised reforms to ensure that nothing like this ever happened again. But Queen wanted to do something more, something that would last for generations, something that would change the relationship between her people and humans forever. The ceremony took place on Prime, in the Great Hall of the Crystal Throne. It was the largest room in the capital, a vast space of shimmering walls and floating lights, where the most important moments in Dominion history had occurred. Nobles from 100 worlds had traveled to witness what would happen. News drones broadcast the event across the galaxy. Daniel Harper walked into that hall on his own 2 feet. He wore formal clothes that blended human and styles, a gift from the Queen herself. He was nervous, more nervous than he had been flying into a dying ship to save strangers. But when he felt hands slip into his own, the nervousness faded. She walked beside him down the long aisle toward the crystal throne. Her skin glowed brighter than he had ever seen it, blue light radiating from her like a star coming alive. She squeezed his hand once, a silent message of support, and he squeezed back. Queen waited for them on the throne, her gown shifting through colors that Daniel did not have names for. When they reached the base of the platform, they stopped and bowed together. "Daniel Harper of Earth," the Queen said, her voice filling the hall with harmonic tones. "You came to our aid without thought of reward. You suffered for your compassion. You showed us what we had forgotten about honor and mercy and the sacred bonds between all thinking beings." She rose from her throne and descended the steps toward him. The crowd gasped. No monarch had done such a thing during a formal ceremony in over 300 years. "By the ancient right of Ani," she continued, "by the debt my daughter owes and the shame my people must carry, I make this proclamation." She stood before Daniel, close enough that he could see the patterns swirling in her luminescent skin, close enough that he could see the emotion in her ancient eyes. "He is ours. From this day forward, Daniel Harper holds the protection of the crown. Any who harm him harm the Dominion itself. Any who aid him aid our people. He shall be granted all rights and privileges of noble standing, and his bloodline shall be honored for 10,000 years." The hall erupted in the sound of stamping feet, the traditional sign of approval. But Daniel barely heard it. He was looking at the tears of joy streaming down her shimmering face, at the smile that lit up her features like sunrise over an alien world. "You did not have to do all this," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "Yes, we did," she replied, "but I would have wanted to anyway." He laughed, and she laughed with him, and for a moment they were not a human engineer and a princess. They were just two people who had found each other against impossible odds, standing together in a hall of crystal and light. Queen watched them with a small smile. She understood now what her daughter had discovered in that cold prison cell, caring for a dying stranger. She understood that compassion was not weakness, that kindness was not foolishness, that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was reach out to someone different and say, "Let me help you." The universe was vast and full of strangers, but some strangers were simply family you had not met yet. And Daniel Harper, the human who had given everything for people he did not know, was theirs now. Forever. 6 months later, Daniel stood on a balcony overlooking the crystal spires of Prime. Stood beside him, her hand warm in his despite the coolness of her skin. In the distance, a ship was approaching, carrying visitors from Earth. His mother, his sister, coming to meet the family he had found among the stars. "Are you happy?" asked. Daniel thought about the question. He thought about everything he had been through, all the pain and fear and uncertainty. And he thought about everything he had gained, the love and purpose and belonging he had never expected to find. "Yes," he said simply, "I am happy." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and together they watched the ship descend through the alien sky. This was home now, and he would not trade it for anything in the universe.